In Homestead, Florida, stands one of this generation's megalithic structures, built by a single man named Ed Leedskalnin. First in Florida City, he relocated the entire castle to Homestead, Florida, where he completed the work. Frequently compared to the pyramids at Giza, the heads of Easter Island, and Stonehenge, we look at Coral Castle. One giant question remains. How did he build this? The only first-hand accounts that we have of other people watching Ed work is only at night, where he has been said to sing to the stones that now make up what he called Rock Gate. Many of these single pieces of rock weigh over 1,000 tons, and the question remains, how did he do this? We explore this question among many other questions about the nature of our reality, hidden technology, mathematics, and the world energy grid. Come along with me on this journey as we look into just how Ed Leedskalnin created Coral Castle. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Yissel Missile Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissel, and we are back with part 21 of the Coral Castle Deep Dive series, where we are currently reading from The Energy Grid by Bruce L. Cathie. And we are reading chapter 16 today, which is titled The Secret Life, Lakhovsky, and Deland's Magnetic Canopy. So I hope you all enjoyed your time while I was away. I surely enjoyed mine. I took a short break and went to Texas to enjoy some pro wrestling, and I had a great time. So, those of you who are new to this channel, new to the series, I just want to give a heads up that once we are finished with the energy grid, which we're a little more than halfway through now, the next book arrived today, titled Anti-Gravity in the World Grid. And we will be covering this in this deep dive series as well. Now, this might be the last book for this deep dive series. I do have other books that are scheduled to arrive soon that also deal with this, similar authors, and I might want to just do different series with those, since it does stray a little bit away from Coral Castle, but it deals with all of these subjects that we're talking about here. But for the meantime, we will be reading The Energy Grid. We're on chapter 16, and we have 29 chapters for this book. And some parts of this series, like you've seen in the previous parts, will cover multiple chapters. But today's is close to 20 pages with a bunch of graphs. So we'll see what we can do here. I want to get through the entire chapter for today. And we'll be sharing our thoughts and opinions as we go. But just giving you all a heads up. Real quickly, later in this chapter, we got tables of numbers. So we're going to be getting into the nitty-gritty here. But thank you all for being here. I appreciate you being here. So we got the photo slideshow again from my visit to Coral Castle back in 2023. And you've all seen it before, but it's good for reviewing while we go through all of this. So without further ado, let's start chapter 16, The Secret of Life by Lakhovsky and Deland's Magnetic Canopy. And you know what? I think we should do some more music in the background here, so just give me a moment. I did miss doing streams here for 2 weeks. I missed it, so please don't get me wrong here. Not running away. Oh, thank you, Zenray. By the way, Zenray is our newest paid member for the channel, so he will be getting exclusive videos before everyone else, and exclusive to member only videos. And I'm trying to restructure the way I do these shows. I'm just building on top of what I already have here, but I do have new shows lined up that they'll be available to members only, and then they'll be available to the public a few weeks after that. So just a heads up on that. Let's see here. We'll get some nice ambient synth wave here. I think it's fitting for Ed. But let's get into chapter 16, shall we? In my earlier publications, I describe a type of ground aerial system being used in many orchards in the United States. The apparatus has proved to be very successful in warding off frost damage to citrus fruit. A further effect has been the promoting of healthier trees and better general growth in the areas covered. I'm just adjusting the music here. I gave dimensions for a similar aerial which would resonate at the frequencies of light and gravity. Since publication, I have received more information on the American system and have been extremely interested in the actual dimensions used. So I want to take a pause here real quick. If you watched the last part of this series, the author went into detail about how when he was trying to get photographs to different embassies, he encountered mysterious people at the hotels that he was staying at, and they were asking him to go along with him to go inspect military vehicles and get tours of military compounds. I really think they were trying to disappear him, and they tried to write somebody else's name on the manila envelope that he had the photographs in, which I think his theory on that, why they were doing that, is true. They were trying to give ownership of those photographs to someone else, and thankfully he stopped them from writing that other name on the folders. Because if they had succeeded in doing that, he probably would not have them anymore. Well, let's carry on here. The aerial was designed by John Del Rey Deland of Riverside, California, and has been in use since 1949. The units cover about 1 acre each and consist of a steel mast about 32 feet high, made of galvanized pipe in 12-foot lengths. The first is a 2-inch pipe set into a 3-foot deep concrete base. 2 other pipes of lesser diameter are screwed in onto the bottom pipe to form a vertical mast 30 feet high. At the masthead, and also at the 2 pipe joints, a waterproof 3/4 inch plywood disc is fitted. At the outer edge of the discs are 7 drilled holes, evenly spaced and parallel to the mast. The holes are about 1/4 inch diameter at 51.42857 degrees apart. See how accurate that is? 10 hard copper wires are strung through each of the holes in the discs, parallel with the mast. At the top disc, the wires are extended about 8 inches parallel to the earth. This forms a wire cage around the mast. The wires pass through the outer edge of the concrete base, then into trenches, which are 18 inches deep and radiate from the mast center at angles of 51.42857 degrees. Again, that's the same as the last measurement. One of the wires in the trench must be orientated with magnetic north. The wires are run from the center of the mast to a distance of which, according to the information I have, is a secret. Oh, hold on. My apologies. Let's reread that. The wires are run from the center of the mast to a distance of 144 feet. They are then attached to a, quote, magnetic pack, end quote. The design of which, according to the information I have, is a secret. The end of each wire is then brought above ground and pointed toward its corresponding end at the top of the mast. The trenches, which form the radius of a circle 288 feet in diameter, are then covered in. The information sheet says that the device does not raise the air temperature of the grove. It is thought that a type of magnetic field of force is set up over the trees by the equipment, which creates within the trees themselves a condition which prevents freezing. Citrus fruit lying on the ground will freeze. Fruit still attached to the tree but touching the ground will also freeze in a short time. The fruit growing on the tree seem to be unaffected. Protection has been given to trees with temperatures as low as 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Besides preventing frost damage, the trees appear to be healthier and to have a slightly higher production rate. No one seems to know how the apparatus works, and the write-up says that there are apparently forces around us of which we know little. Hey, Beyond the Box, good to see you here. Good to have you here. The first thing I realized when reading this was that the radius of the circle encompassing the ground aerials was 144 feet, or the harmonic of the speed of light. The diameter, of course, being 288, or double the harmonic of light. With a mast height of 30 feet, the angles that the wire ends make with the ground at the periphery of the circle were calculated at 11 degrees 35 feet, or 695 minutes of arc. The pure harmonic reciprocal of the speed of light is 694444. So 695 is near enough in a practical sense. See diagram 22 for layout of the system. Let's go look at that. And this is really far into the book here, these diagrams. The one that he's talking about here. '21. It's like, it should be right at the end here, and it's not. You gotta be kidding me. Diagram 22, but it only goes up to 21. I think we're running into a problem here. Photocopy 4. I think they forgot to add the last diagram here, because it should be here. How odd. So it goes up to diagram 21 and that's it. Yeah. How strange. Unless it's a misprint. Well, anyways, we have another diagram here now, so maybe that's what they were talking about, because 22 is not here. I'm going to make my window large here so you can all see this. There we go. Alright. So we have diagram 13. It says, showing dimensions of ground aerial, which is exactly what we were talking about in this chapter. It says, an aerial similar to the one described, the measurements are in grid feet, which are factored by 6080/6000 to convert them to statute feet. The height, 29.515 grid feet multiplied by 2, gives a value of 59.03. The reciprocal of this value is 1694, a harmonic which has connections with gravity, mass, and communication harmonics. So this is what they were using in the orchard to get a higher yield of fruit. And this is what I just read here. And this bottom one says, separation angle of the ground aerials 51.42857 degrees. This is equal to 3085.714286 minutes of arc. The reciprocal of this value equals 0.000324,074, very close to the Earth harmonic of 324 demonstrated in other sections of the book. Alright, I wonder what else they're going to be talking about with this. Alright. Let's continue on here. We're on page 142. Did Mr. Deland have access to secret knowledge when he constructed his aerials? Or has the method of construction been passed down through the ages without anyone really knowing how or why the system works? I believe that, as all physical substances being manifested in alternate pulses of matter and antimatter, then such an aerial system would be subject to these pulses at the frequency of 144,000 pulses a grid second. By induction, the tuned aerial would set up a secondary field which has a harmonic affinity with matter and life itself. This would increase the strength of the life forces and help to shield living things from any adverse influences. One of my fellow pilots, Mr. D.R. Offwood, became interested in the information I had on the aerial layout and proceeded to construct a similar system in a nursery and the South Island of New Zealand to test the effects and carry out a series of experiments. It was agreed that a quarter-size mast would be constructed, as according to radio theory, a quarter-wave aerial should pick up a fairly strong signal. The aerial was set up, and an investigation into electroculture was carried out between September 1972 and June 1973. A full report was written up and presented to me for publication in 1974. The following is the main body of the report by Don Offwood, including tables of growth and etc. Report on an investigation into electroculture at Christchurch between September 1972 and June 1973. This report is a record of 2 separate experiments I carried out during the spring and summer of 1972 to 1973, in which I attempted to evaluate the reported effect the magnetic field has on plant growth. This was done by growing plants inside an area of a wire aerial and comparing their rate of growth with that of other plants of the same species planted outside this area of influence. Such aerials are reported to be available commercially in California and are used to the exclusion of oil-burning smoke pots in orchards on frosty nights. It is suspected that the wires are of such arrangement that they are in harmony with the wavelength of light and the Earth's magnetic field, and have the effect of concentrating or amplifying this energy source, which the plants are able to tap, it being the most natural of energy sources next to the sun. The aerial was built to quarter size of the dimensions shown in diagram 22, which I believe that's diagram 13, since there is no diagram 22 in the book. Because of the physical problems in the building, or in building a full-size one to the home handyman. The vertical support was an old galvanized water pipe. The insulators were made from commercial formica. The wire was number 10 galvanized. The 7 wire coils having alnico bar magnets, and that's spelled ALNICO, placed inside them, North Pole uppermost. This arrangement was set up with one of the legs aligned along magnetic north. This aerial was constructed on a nurseryman's land where the Waimakariri sandy loam soil had no special treatment and was of a uniform nature. And for those that want to know, that word is spelled Waimakari. The nurseryman who kindly allowed me to use his land also supplied the lettuce plants, which were 2 to 3 inches in size and uniform. He suggested lettuces for the test, as they are a quick-growing plant suitable for an experiment of this kind. They were planted on the 3rd of September, 1972, beside the central pole at 5 feet and 11 feet, and beside the coil at 30 feet, and at 50 feet out from the pole. This latter group were assumed to be clear of the influence, if any, of the aerial arrangement. All the plants received water on planting, and again that evening, to help them get established. But after this time, the only water they received came from rainfall. Readings of the average diameter across each plant were made 5 and 8 weeks after planting and were as follows. The dimensions are in inches. And here, I'll just read out table 1 here. But very quickly, I will show it on screen here. All right. So table 1 reads 50 feet out from pole. On October 11th, it was 5.5 inches, 5.6 inches, and 6.5 inches. The 5.5 datum was 0.5. Then by October 29th, they measured 7 inches, 7 inches, 7.5 inches, and 8 inches, with a 7 datum of 0.5. 30 feet out from the pole, October 11th, had 2 plants, both 6 inches. The 5.5 datum was 0.5 inches. Then on October 29th, they reached 8.5 inches and 9.5 inches, with the 7 datum of 2 inches. 11 feet out, so this is getting closer to the pole. October 11th, one plant was 7.3 inches and the second one died. The 5.5 datum was 1.8 inches. Then on October 29th, the single plant that survived grew from 7.3 inches to 10 inches, with a 7 datum of 3 inches. 5 feet out from the pole were 2 plants on October 11th. One was 8.3 inches and 8.5 inches. The 5.5 datum was 3 inches. On October 29th, those same 2 plants reached a height of 10.5 inches, with the 7 datum being 3.5 inches. Then besides the pole, so right next to it, it was 8.3 inches, 8.3 inches, 8.5 inches, and 8.8 inches. There were 4 plants there. 5.5 datum was 3 inches, and by October 29th, the plants grew to 12.5 inches, 13.5 inches, and the last 2 at 10 inches exact. The 7 datum was 6 inches. Using 5.5 inches as a datum for comparison of the measurements on October 11th and 7 inches for those measurements taken on October 29th, the datum columns show the average plant size at each position, which displays the accelerated plant growth exhibited by plants closer to the center of the aerial. For example, the two by the pole finished up 6 inches greater in diameter than the examples which were clear of the area at the 50 feet station, and had well-developed hearts. The two plants which grew to 10 inches beside the pole were infected with aphids. As I had not expected, the marked results shown they were unfortunately rather overcrowded, these two plants succumbing to the larger two. The results obtained do show a marked improvement in the lettuce condition the closer they were to the center of the arrangement. The two plants by the pole were 73% larger than the plants outside the test area, although this figure is of course misleading on so few test samples. My conclusion is that the test plants exhibited accelerated growth rate and terminal plant size when planted within the arrangement of wires described, due to a cause not established or obvious to any conventional approach. The reader may find it interesting to consider the following. Angle of one segment equals 51.42857 degrees. Half of this angle equals 25.71428 degrees, which equals 1542.857 minutes. The square root of this value equals 39.27922. Harmonic 3927922 is close to harmonic 3928371. Harmonic 3928371 equals earth field A minus earth field B. All of the ground aerials related to the north, south, east, or west position exhibit this factor, or a value related to 1/2 or quarter of it. A further series of experiments was carried out by Mr. Offwood using a type of wire loop aerial which can be erected around a single plant or tree to promote growth. I came across this device quite by chance when browsing through a bookstore in Auckland. The book was called The Secret of Life by G. Lakhovsky and was first printed in 1935, later reprinted in a revised edition by courtesy of Messrs. Heinemann from Medical Books Limited, 3rd edition, 1963. Very few copies of the book were available locally, so I felt lucky to acquire one for my ever-growing library. This is a heads up to all you keeping track on these books. This is one to take a look for. I'm making a note for myself here. All right. To date, the work of Lakhovsky has been completely ignored by orthodox science, much I believe to the detriment of many thousands of ill people in the world today. His research and experiments were built on the fundamental basis that, quote, every living being emits radiations, end quote. This had been backed up in recent times by John Pfeiffer, an American working in the field of radio astronomy. His book, called The Changing Universe, published in 1956, states in part, quote, Each human being is an emitter of radio waves, a living broadcasting station of exceedingly low power. The stomach will send out not only infrared heat waves, but the entire spectrum of light. Ultraviolet rays, X-rays, radio waves, and so on. Of course, all these radiations are fantastically weak, and the radio waves are among the weakest. But the 50-foot aerial of the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, the most accurately constructed aerial in existence, could pick up radio signals coming from your stomach more than 4 miles away. End quote. And again, that book referenced is called The Changing Universe. By John Pfeiffer, and his last name is spelled Pfeiffer. And that was published in 1956. So the Lakhovsky book from 35, if you find one of those, let me know. But that's a first edition. Third edition would probably be easier to find from 63. But I like getting these first edition books because then there's less of a chance of things being cut out of it. And that's just my opinion here. There's some books that they do get these little typographical errors. They have to fix them. Kind of like there's no diagram 22 in this book. Where is it? It's not here. Last diagram shown is diagram 21. Got photocopy 1. Got map 13. And then diagram 21. And that's on Coral Castle. That is 90 pages from here. So, still relevant to this series if you forgot. I know it might get easy to forget about what we're talking about here, going into all the technical details, but this is very much related to Ed Leedskalnin and Coral Castle, and this book covers that at the end. So we're looking into the technology that Ed could have used, or the information that he was privy to during the time. So let's continue here. We got about 10 pages left, but there's some diagrams in the middle, so it's really not going to be a normal 10 pages. The foreword to the book states that, quote, Lakhovsky's original theories and amazing experimental results in human beings, animals, and plants, as fully set forth in the revised edition, are destined to become a landmark in the history of radiobiology, standing high above the ruins of orthodox misconceptions of the laws of nature. End quote. What have we to learn from this remarkable man? He states that the living cell is an electromagnetic resonator capable of emitting and absorbing radiations of very high frequency. Life is dynamic equilibrium of all cells, the harmony of multiple radiations which react upon one another. Disease, on the other hand, is the oscillatory disequilibrium of cells originating from external causes. Each living cell gives off radiations from its nucleus, which has its own individual oscillating frequency. The geometric makeup of the cell causes it to act as an electric circuit, which has self-inductance and capacity. The natural oscillation of energy in the cell, I believe, to be due to the constant interaction of the matter and antimatter cycle discussed in other sections of this book. A pendulum-like pulsing occurs between the physical and non-physical substances. When stronger radiations are imposed upon the cell by outside influences, then the natural rhythm of the cell is affected and it begins to break down. If the radiation of the cell can be restored to its original rhythm, then it will resume its healthy state. Lakhovsky found that he could accomplish this restoration of natural rhythm by means of artificially induced oscillating fields. To do this, he employed two different methods. First, by the use of spiral loops of copper wire, which would set up electromagnetic fields harmonically tuned to the life forces. These loops of wire were placed around the plant or area to be treated, and the natural bionic rhythm would be intensified by the inductance of the wire loop. In one of his experiments, he artificially inoculated a series of geranium plants with cancer cells and placed them in separate pots. He states, quote, "A month later, when the tumors had developed, I took one of the plants at random, which I surrounded with a circular spiral consisting of copper and measuring 30 centimeters in diameter. Its extremities not joined together, being fixed into an ebonite support. I then let the experiment follow its natural course during several weeks. After a fortnight, I examined the plants. I was astonished to find that all my geraniums, or the stalks bearing the tumors, were dead and dried up, with the exception of the geranium surrounded by the copper spiral. This had since grown to twice the height of other untreated, healthy plants." End quote. And in parentheses here it says, "The tumor was eventually shed, and only a scar on the stem of the plant was visible." End parentheses. When I read of these experiments by Lakhovsky, I was sure that somehow, either by design or by chance, he had constructed his spiral coils to some geometric dimension which would set up a natural resonance with matter. Possibly any diameter coil would show some results, but one that was perfectly tuned would give him the remarkable results he had with the tumorous growths. By calculation, I discovered that a diameter of 30.02 centimeters was equal to a diameter of 0.972 geodetic feet, which gave a radius of 0.486 geodetic feet. The area of the encompassing circle would be 0.742 geodetic feet. In fact, the tuned spirals he used were within 0.02 of a centimeter, which is close enough practically, as this would be much less than the diameter of the wire used. To an exact dimension required to set up harmonic resonances tuned to time, and harmonics associated with the Great Pyramid. Any type of matter in such a field would be subject to sympathetic vibrations, which would restore harmony to the natural rhythms. The loop size decided on for the experiments carried out by Mr. Offwood was 12 geodetic inches, which we considered at the time to be a dimension which should give a reasonable result. Although we now know that ultimate efficiency would not be obtained with a loop of this dimension, the diameter of the wire used was such that a partial success would have been expected. As Mr. Offwood himself suggests, a metal hoop of any dimension would possibly have some effect on growth by concentrating the magnetic field in a small area, but the perfectly tuned aerial would give the maximum results. The following is his report. The purpose of this part of the experiment was to test a suggestion that if an open loop of wire of 1 grid foot, approximately 12 1/8 inches diameter, was placed around a tree or plant, then the plant would grow faster than its counterparts. The suggestion was that these loops would have a similar effect to the main aerials. That is, concentrate the magnetic energy within the area of its influence. The spiral effect created would extend from both ends of the wire loop to encompass the plant vertically. To test this idea once again, I asked my nurseryman friends indulgence and advice, and set up a series of wire loops on 4 varieties of plants. Their unpronounceable botanical names they list the names here. I'm not even going to try. You know what, I'll try. I'll give it a shot. Why not? Their unpronounceable botanical names being Chame, Cyperus, Lawsoniana, or Elwoody, and Chame Cyperus, Lawsoniana, Alumi, Fabalium, Squamium, and Choisa ternata. There we go. So that's the first one. Okay. And then here's the diagram of what he was attempting to do. Which really, I think you could do this with indoor plants as well. And with a pretty thin wire. Just as long as you get it to the top of the plant, it should help it grow faster, right? The plants were all growing in rows. As the table shows, I varied the thread of the loops, the height of the loop above the soil, and the pitch of the thread to see what pattern emerged, if any. The loops were placed in position on the 12th of September, and all the plant heights recorded. Subsequent height measurements were taken on the 5th of January, the 15th of March, and finally on the 11th of May of 1973. These measurements being subtracted from the original height to obtain the growth of the plant on each of these dates. I then averaged the height increase of all those plants with loops, those plants without loops, and compared them, showing the result as a percentage. On the 5th of January, the average height gain of the plants with a loop was 4.675 inches, while the average gain of those plants that did not have a loop was 4.640 inches. The difference between these is 0.035 inches, which is a 0.759% gain in favor of those plants with loops. On the 15th of March, the figures had changed to 10.3 inches for those with a loop and 9.5 inches without, which gave an 8.42% advantage to those plants with loops. The 11th of May readings showed that this advantage had increased slightly to 9.87%, as is displayed in Table 4. So let's look real quick here. Oh yeah, these are the number tables. We'll look at them later when we get to them. The reader will note that the 3 results were all positive. That is, the plants with loops grew taller than those without loops during the length of time the experiment was conducted, by the percentages shown. Another interesting point is that the growth tendency seemed to accelerate, as shown by the increasing percentage. I am sure the reader will allow me to use 3 decimal points as to reduce my results down to a more realistic single decimal point has a very marked effect on the end result. I'll just show you these from table 2. And you know what? In the next month, I might be getting a new camera to get better focus on this, because this is kind of ridiculous having to just sit here and try to focus in. There we go. Look, I said focus in and it focused in. Thanks. So table 2, we got average height increased by plants with a loop, average height increased by plants without a loop, and the difference shown as a percentage. And the dates on the top, that's the 5th of January, the 15th of March, and the 11th of May for the year 1973. So we got about a 10% higher yield with the coils. The results obtained from the other 3 test species follow with their associated tables. As in row A, all the plant tests, or all the test plants displayed positive results. That is, plants with a loop grew taller during the test period. The tendency for this phenomenon to accelerate was evident in 3 of the rows, the exception being row B, which displayed a decrease from 9.190 to 9.010. The small number of plants involved must also be considered as affecting the accuracy of these results and percentages, as misreading the ruler by a small amount has a magnified effect on the end percentage. It will also be noted that I omitted to have some loops of a diameter other than a grid foot present, to test the possibility that mass of metal of any dimension would have a beneficial effect. Also, the loops were made of galvanized wire, where I suspect copper might have been better. I examined my results to compare left-hand to right-hand loops for any obvious advantage. In Table 9, the plant growth for left-hand and right-hand loops for each row on the appropriate dates were averaged. With 2 exceptions, if one set of plants started out growing well, they maintained their advantage. In row B, the advantage changed from right hand to left hand, while in row C, the change was left hand to right hand. Overall, left hand threads on the wire loops appeared to be favored over right hand by 10 to 2, but I'm unable to offer any explanation or draw any constructive conclusion from this because of the smaller number of test plants involved. Left-hand loops. So does that just mean going to the like if you're going by the direction that you're facing, left-hand loops going to the left, right-hand loops going to the right? I'm assuming that's what he means here. I could deduct no advantage between those plants having one end of the loop underground as against those being clear of the ground, or between greater or lesser pitch. Again, this was due to the small number of test plants involved, and I was therefore unable to determine the optimum pitch. In both experiments, I showed to my own satisfaction that when plants are planted within an arrangement of wires as described, they will exhibit a rate of growth superior to those plants not within the area of influence. I would suggest that under the above conditions, the energy of the magnetic field tends to amplify in such a way that any plant within the area is made healthier by this boost in its life force and will grow at an accelerated rate. Work done by Justin Christoffel before 1912 and up to 1927 seems to show that this boost is of such a nature that it builds up over a period of time and may not take full effect for a year or more. And Justin's last name is spelt Christofleau. He attributed his remarkable results to his equipment generating electricity, which accelerated his plant growth, while I suspect that the magnetic field will in time be found to be closer to the cause of this phenomenon. Lettuces are relatively fast-growing plants, and I was therefore able to obtain results within a short period, but the aerial's effect on an orchard or a pine forest would be worth investigating. Although of differing dimensions to the aerial described in Harmonic 695, this aerial did exhibit some of the same dimensions. I suspect that if an aerial or assembly of wires was arranged involving several fundamental harmonics, then positive results would be available. I have not attempted to write this report in a completely scientific manner, as I am not a scientist. It is purely a record of my observations and comments on the results, so far as my limited knowledge of the subject allows. Signed, Donald R. Offwood, February 1975. The results of Mr. Offwood's experiments show without doubt that a wire loop aerial does, in a most positive way, influence the growth rate and health of plants. The next step to take in further experiments is to make use of perfectly tuned aerials for maximum results and to try a series of loops constructed from wires of different metals. I believe that certain metals which have mass values close to the harmonic values of light, mass, and gravity could improve the radiation field produced within the coil. For instance, aluminum, which consists of a combination of isotopes with mass numbers of 26 and 27, could be produced. If the compound consisted of measured proportions, the average mass value could be made to match that of the harmonic energy equivalent derived from the unified equation, 26.944. The radiations from this type of wires should theoretically be more intense. It is interesting to note that wires made from aluminum are excellent electrical conductors, and that transmission lines are now being made from this metal. So we have 5 tables here to briefly show. They're numbered tables, but I really feel like we can take a glimpse at them and it should be fine. Just give me a moment here and I'll blow up this video. Alright. So just briefly to run down this, we got table 3. These are all the height and growth measurements. And you can see the thread on the other side here. The first part of the table. It says LHRH. left hand, right hand. But I'll zoom in to give a good shot for all you those that are interested. There we go. This is for you all to look at and review later if you want to go ahead and pause this just to get a good sense of the differences. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Alright, and then we got table 5 here. Next we have table 6. And again, these are the author's results of his growing tests on the plants. And then lastly, table 7 here. If we can get it to focus. Come on. See, this way I'm not reading everything off one by one, and I don't think any of you'd be able to follow it if I were to do that right now. So just showing these tables as is what I think is best for moving forward. All right. The fact that... Alright, hold on. So we're almost finished with this chapter, by the way. Those were the big tables that were at the end of this thing. Yeah. We got less than a page left. The fact that loops with the left-hand thread were most efficient could possibly be due to the experiments being conducted in the southern hemisphere. The opposite would apply in the northern hemisphere. This would be similar to the vortexual action of weather systems, which is also electrical in nature. Lakhovsky carried out extensive research into cell structure, and in 1923 he constructed a machine called a radiocellular oscillator, which he used in his experiments with plants. As his work progressed, he came to the conclusion that the use of ultra-short waves alone was not the complete answer, as the thermal effects were sometimes dangerous. He conceived an idea for a new type of machine that would give, quote, an oscillatory shock to all the cells in the body of a human being simultaneously, end quote. By use of dampened electrostatic waves, thermal effects were at a minimum, and cell injury would not occur. In 1931, Lakhovsky perfected what he called his multiple wave oscillator. This apparatus was capable of generating an electrostatic field covering all wavelengths from 10 centimeters to 400 meters. Within such a field, all cells could find their own frequency of vibration within a range of 750,000 to 3 milliards per second. Added to this, each circuit gave forth a series of harmonics extending far into the infrared and visible light regions. This machine was eventually used in many hospitals in European countries for the treatment of numerous diseases. This included the treatment of cancer. No harmful effects have ever been reported, but many beneficial results were obtained. A completely new branch of science was opened up by this man into the electrochemical structure of living matter. His research was obviously important to mankind. Is his work to be lost to us because he was ahead of his time? Because of my own extreme interest in the structure of matter, I intend to build a multiple wave oscillator for my own private research. Who knows what other secrets may be prized from the limitless expanse of natural law. And there we have chapter 16. So just a heads up, for next week we have chapter 17, The Harmonics of Humans. And I think we will also try to tackle chapter 18, Builders in Stone. Yeah, that's what we'll do. But today was fairly interesting. We had very specific things here with plant life and how that all plays into like the growth patterns, having the coil wires of copper. I actually use some copper wire in my plants that I have here at home. Again, real quick, we are this far into the book, so we're getting closer toward the end here for the energy grid. But very fascinating stuff. Lots of technology talked about in this part of the series. A lot of experiments being carried out with radio waves. I mean, we're learning here with the human body being a radio wave generator. I'm not too surprised by that, but the extent of that I'm quite surprised by. So again, I'd like to thank you all for being here. We should be back on schedule now, so expect next Tuesday to be our next part in this series for Coral Castle. I'm trying to do as thorough of a study and deep dive series as I can on this subject. I feel reading chapter by chapter from these books spread out among various videos will help us accomplish that. And we're also learning new things as we get deeper into the series. As far as will we get solid answers about Coral Castle and Ed Leedskalnin's methods of putting together the castle, lifting the rocks, I feel we'll get partial answers. I don't think we'll get complete answers, but that's what we're looking here for, are as many answers as we can obtain. And I have a feeling the answers are scattered about in many different books. So compiling them and putting them all together here in a series takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of intellectual input. So I'm doing my best here to present all of this to you in a digestible way. And also for those that want to carry on looking into this and diving deeper into the research, But the Energy Grid book by Bruce L. Cathie, it mentions Coral Castle in the final chapters. So it's all linked together with what we're talking about here on this series. I haven't deviated too far just yet. I have so many new books coming in on similar concepts of all of this with anti-gravity and the world grid, ether technology. A lot of these books actually that are listed on the back of the book we're reading. I picked up most of these, if not all of them. I believe I picked all of them up. So they're all on the way here. But after the Energy Grid, we will be reading this Anti-Gravity in the World Grid, which was also mentioned in the Coral Castle book that we originally started this series with. So I consider this very relevant to this series, and we will get through it, hopefully before the end of summer. But that'll be about it for today. So again, I thank all of you for being here. Make sure to tune in to the rest of my lives later this week. We have the Bermuda Triangle Deep Dive series on Thursdays. We're going to try for 8 p.m. again, like we did tonight. It's 2 hours later than how we were doing it before I took a break. And keep an eye out for the Great Lakes Triangle series, along with a new Chicago series coming up on Saturdays. Will it be this Saturday? We'll see how I feel. But getting back into this after having 2 weeks off, not bad. Not bad. A little over an hour. We're doing good here. So until the next one. Class dismissed.